It starts with crafting distinctive dissertations. Everybody got it? Please? Oh, good. I get very nervous that you didn't get it. Everyone got, look for it. Crafting distinctive dissertations. Everybody got it? What I'd like to do now is take about 5 minutes. I'd like you to read that first section, and I'd like you to read chapter 1. So if you read these 2 pages, we'll take a little time for you to think about what I'm talking about relative to understanding the project of chapter 1 of your dissertation. And it, again, relates to the thesis as well. I'd like to draw your attention to the next slide. What should be in chapter 1? That's a very large question for many of us, especially if that's where you are at the moment, trying to write. Now clearly, I'm giving you the American experience here and my own experience. So, you know, there are many answers to this question. But nonetheless, I believe that through my own coursework and my own work and my understanding, at least of the American situation, this is what works well for us in what we call the 5-chapter traditional dissertation. And I'll explain more what that means as we go on. Obviously, the first point here is that, again, what people would like to get an understanding of when they begin your thesis is to understand the context and the history of the research topic or question. Invite them into what has happened before that makes sense about your research question. Clearly, you need to talk about it at length in a more focused way, and so the second part, or the first part, because usually these first 2 are together, you need a real statement of the research question, a discussion more specifically about what it means and what it's about. And then the second part, let's call it that now, is the research question itself. As you gather a little bit from what you've just read, I'd like to talk about the research question in a way that makes sense to some of the things you've heard about already over the past 2 days and my own experience. Namely, we talk about a research question that's kind of a broad umbrella. It can be sometimes 2 or 3 interrogatory questions. It doesn't have to be just one question. But it nonetheless should be an overarching research question that allows for you to have, at least as you read, 4 or more secondary or subsidiary questions. In other words, we want secondary questions that illumine, that explore, that explain, that investigate several aspects of this primary research question. Now, the current rationale for the research question allows you to once again think about it in a different way. Now that you've told us its history, now that you've explained it a little bit more precisely, and now that you've actually given us the question, I like our dissertation students to give us a bit of a hint about how it relates to the research. So at this point, I do one of 2 things. I ask them to give us 1 or 2 of the major publications that relate to their research question. Who is defining and leading this particular question out there besides yourself? In other words, if you were to advance the most important study related to your research question, it's the one that should be here. Because you want to tell the reader that this is the state of where the question is now, and your dissertation is going to take it to the next stage. You are going to move our knowledge to the next stage. So we, right away, want to know where it is, and this is where you can do that. There's something I like to do also, especially for those who are doing qualitative dissertations. I like to have a section, either part of the rationale or after it, that is the voice of the researcher. Each of you bring your own unique backgrounds, experiences, abilities to this project. And if you can talk about it and help the reader understand where you are coming from, it helps us realize its value and importance for you and understand what gifts you actually bring to it. So I think it's very valuable, especially in qualitative ones, but it can be for quantitative ones as well. Who are you as this researcher. This gives you a chance to tell the reader of this work about you. Importantly, in our world, we always have to figure out, well, what are these terms that we're going to use in this thesis? And usually they're related to, of course, the primary literature that we're using. So the next section of chapter 1 usually is anywhere from 4 to 8 different terms that will be used in the thesis. And always they are, at least in my work, with my graduate learners, they always are defined explicitly from the literature. Now you notice I have two other things here that are a little bit perhaps more unusual for you. Notice I've got the word method and limitations. What I'm actually showing you in this slide is what we usually consider the dissertation proposal. This is all the pieces we would like to see in a proposal. Both the method will move to chapter 3 and limitations will move to chapter 5 later. But for now, it's good for you to give your committee or your team in your world a sense of your dissertation proposal. And these are all the pieces that you need. The last one, of course, has to do with the actual chapters coming next in your own dissertation. Having said that, let's go back to what I wrote. Now you have a chance to play a little bit around with the text. Obviously, you can see here that I'm interested in trying to get you excited about not only the history of your problem, but how much it should fit, if you notice in that second paragraph, with the research method you're choosing. One of the more difficult things for the supervisor and for you is to make sure you have the right method for your research question. And that is also part of building an exemplary dissertation. Being able to match appropriately the right method to answer your research question. And so again, I try and get you to think about that really early on here. And you can see the different parts of chapter 1 as you walk through these different things that I've written about here. Again, I put it in the context of higher education, so all the examples are from my world about what we talk about. College presidencies, what faculty do, what happens, again, with students, all that is part of the statement of our problems that we have in our literature. But again, the statement of the problem here helps us much more understand what you're undertaking. The research questions, again, as you see, are broad in their scope, but yet also accompanied by secondary questions. And again, somewhere in either the primary or the secondary questions, the word why should be there. Don't forget the causal dimension, because that is, again, what makes your work even more exemplary. Again, the current rationale helps us get a glimpse of the literature that's already out there, and the other parts of chapter 1 are pretty straightforward. So, chapter 1, you now have a little better sense of it. You ready to go? Let's go to chapter 2. So read on. We'll take about 2, 3, 4 more minutes to figure out the most difficult part for many of us, that literature review. Let's talk a little bit about what that means now in this next section. So have a good read. I'll be back.